Unscripted.
You know, more than anything lately, I think this generation, Sony has had put up with a lot more FUD and a lot more misinformation than they have had to previous generations. Some of that could be, I guess, owed down to the fact that, Microsoft is doing some kind of grassroots campaign where there's a lot of people that are sort of getting their hands on with a lot of Xbox products at little to no cost. And, those people are obviously going to praise and talk about the Xbox in a positive light, even when it comes to streaming and things like that. I think I've mentioned before, Microsoft sent out a lot of those really expensive phones so people could test out xCloud, and then you wonder why people are like, oh, I love xCloud. I mean, it's not really hard to put two and two together. Again, these aren't professional reviewers or anything. It's just like kind of greasing the wheels, and I get that, and that's something that a lot of companies do and stuff like that. But it is very interesting when you sort of see that sort of happen at the end of the day. But again, Sony has had to put up with a little bit of misinformation and some FUD and things like that. Some of the latest things, even from Digital Foundry themselves, weren't exactly the kindest things to say, and I do feel like now what we're kind of seeing with now that we kind of see what's actually happening, Sony themselves have come out and commented and kind of made Digital Foundry and some fanboys and things like that look a little bit silly. In particular, a lot of people were talking about the PlayStation 5 solid state drive as it was something that it's the solid state drive, that's something that everybody makes up. It does this, it does that. But again, I feel like people aren't getting the whole picture when it comes to the PlayStation 5 solid-state drive. It's not only a data storage thing, but it's also something that delivers ultra-fast data to the CPU and GPU, resulting in like gameplay, physics, graphics, thanks to the I/O actually built into the SoC. A lot of people are still assuming that, you have to wait a couple seconds for things to load and things like that. It's simply not the case, and it's going to continue to get better. I've already covered the Oodle situation where they're taking advantage of the Kraken and stuff like that, and so we're going to be able to see a ton of that stuff sort of broke down into what's going to be able to be accomplished with the PlayStation 5, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. For some reason, the funny thing to me is when I keep hearing about this stuff about, oh, well, you're a fanboy or you're this or you're that, I always look to the point where, listen, I'm a gamer. I go where the games are. I try to get every console, every generation, but at the end of the day, that sometimes isn't exactly feasible. And so with that being said, I tried to go just where the games, like this generation, this past one, I got an Xbox One first. They had clearly the games that I was interested in. Later on, when they stopped making games for the most part or anything tangible, I started enjoying my PlayStation 4 much more. And when it starts next generation, clearly you can see a huge gulf in the amount of exclusives and content that you're going to be able to play soon. I think Microsoft will be set up for later down the road, but until that point, it doesn't look like that's actually going to be the case. And so, just as a fan, I kind of have to look at from the outside and go, this doesn't look good if you're an Xbox fan. So hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying when I do mention that, because I do feel like Sony's gotten kind of the short end of the stick when it comes to a lot of this stuff, and they actually have a very quality machine. So Sony did fire back, and we did get some pretty good information. Strictly speaking, a lot of people were running with this negativity about the PS5 not supporting HDMI 2.1, which is an actual fallacy, because now it's been confirmed that they actually do that, and I am going to link this in the description so you guys can check it out. This was just actually something that just came out, and it was an article in Tech Radar that says HDMI 2.1 isn't necessary for PS5, says Sony product manager. Sony's no projectors don't have HDMI 2.1. But but is that really a problem? So during this, it says, do we really need HDMI 2.1 to get the most out of a PS5 or other next-gen consoles? While much has been made of the new HDMI standard, enabling as it does 4K video at 120 Hz or even 8K gaming at 60 Hz, one Sony executive thinks it isn't going to be the game changer for players just yet. Christopher Mullins, according to this, Sony's digital home and cinema project manager, ahead of the announcement of Sony's new high-end projector range, which includes 10,000 lumen beamers called VPL. And when it came to discussion of the PlayStation 5, Mullins was adamant that a projector didn't need 2.1 HDMI to be a good choice for gaming. He says the next generation of consoles are incredibly exciting, and are all about offering the best-in-class and 4K experience. 4K at 120 Hz is interesting, but actually with the next-gen consoles, the baseline performance is to hit a really good native 4K 60 Hz performance and to have the performance across many games. So obviously, none of the new projectors that they announced support HDMI 2.1. In fact, very few even TVs support HDMI 2.1. I had to spend quite a bit of money to get the CX series from LG to get a TV that supports HDMI 2.1 because I wanted to be able to play at, you know, the 4K 120 hertz. I know that there's not going to be a ton of games that support that, but to say that that PlayStation 5 doesn't support HDMI 2.1 is a fallacy because they've didn't actually say that. It actually does in fact support HDMI 2.1. But for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are both capable of 4K 120 hertz. Not a lot of games are going to support those settings from launch, and the hardware capabilities that would become more useful down the road in the product cycle won't be technically necessary to enjoy the PlayStation 5. So not necessary, but it still supports it, delivering the hardware and output convincing HDR and offer decent motion handling, which is something Sony's TVs actually do. Part of the problem is that the pace of the innovation in the TV market is outstripping that of the projector field, which is why you still often find old operating systems on projectors, with many using an Android OS that isn't even optimized for television, and why dynamic HDR formats and HDMI 2.1 aren't sweeping the world of projectors just yet. So even though the PlayStation 5 fully supports HDMI 2.1. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks. Even though it is supporting HDMI 2.1, for the most part, you don't really need it because a lot of games are probably going to be doing 4K 60, and the occasional ones that do hit 120 frames, you know, again, I think those probably will be fewer and far between, and we'll have to kind of concede what's going to do what. But at the end of the day, I do feel like that it's very important to kind of note that Sony indeed does have a console that is completely capable of that, and they have a console that's completely capable of doing, you know, exactly what they said it was going to do, which I also feel is a very compelling argument and a reason to actually buy a PlayStation 5. You know, and I know that the Xbox Series X is technically more powerful, but at the same time, I feel like the Xbox Series X is strictly relying on that, whereas Sony is actually having the games and things like that to actually sort of fall back on. And I think that that's a much more tangible thing to gamers. Like, you can sell somebody on a super powerful machine, and we've seen that before, right? The Atari Jaguar, for instance, was 64 bits, and that was at a time when, you know, the 32-bit stuff was becoming the norm. So we realistically have a situation where both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are both capable of such a thing, but, you know, will they actually be able to pull it off? And again, the Series S isn't actually, you know, something that's going to have to really take advantage of it either way as well, just for the simple fact that, you know, it's not going to be able to do 4K. So you're talking about 1440p 120, and even HDMI 2.0 standard with, you know, most of the newer TVs and things like that, you'll be able to get the 1440p 120. So I know, like, I was talking to Mooch when I was trying to decide on which OLED TV to get, and he was telling me his are HDMI 2.0, but for the most part, games next generation are going to support, you know, that 2.0. For instance, I have a TV that supports 4K 120 hertz, but I don't have a HDMI 2.1 cable. I just have a regular 4K cable, so it doesn't support it. So when I turn my Xbox One X on, it says that it doesn't support 4K 120 hertz, that it only supports 1440p 120 hertz. So I have to order that specific HDMI 2.1 cable, which is quite a bit more costlier than, say, a standard HDMI 4K cable, which is very interesting, but definitely something that I'm going to pick up before next gen rolls around, because I feel like it's going to be important, and I do want to play stuff like Call of Duty at 120 hertz, or maybe I'll try out Gears of War 5 at 120 hertz just to see what all the hubbub is about. Of course, Halo, whenever that should release, should be 120 hertz. A lot of these older games as well, I could see that being a case. I know Dirt 5 is supposedly going to be 120 hertz on both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, which, again, you just maybe want to tinker around with these things and see exactly what is going on. So if you were one of the people that are kind of buying into the negative news of this console or that console, there's this terrible rumor that the PS5 doesn't actually support HDMI 2.1. It does. Just, you can't be confused just because a employee says something's not necessary. doesn't mean that it's not supported. So that is something that a lot of people have to kind of get out of their heads as well, because we're going into a day and age of a lot of misinformation going on out there. A lot of people, one way or the other, for as much people say they're not into console wars, they sure do help spread a lot of this stuff. And I do feel like, it's just important to kind of get that out there. And I can also link it, like I said, so everybody can check it out. I think both these consoles are going to do fantastic things, and I think we're going to be seeing a ton of great stuff from both Sony and Microsoft. But it really just comes down to kind of personal thoughts and personal opinions on all of this stuff. But I do indeed hope you enjoyed this video. Please take a minute to consider subscribing. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Shout out to all the old subscribers, new subscribers, everybody in between. You're amazing people. You keep me going. You make everything great. Take the minute to please like the video. That's the best thing you can do for a small channel like mine. It just absolutely means the world to me, and I wish all of you to stay safe, happy, and healthy, and have a fantastic weekend. Rack 'em up. Game on, my friends. Game on. Have a great day. Crapgamer out.
Unscripted.